We may have a few other people join us, but I know you've got lots of information to cover, Heather, so we'll get started with our introduction. So welcome everyone. This is SCORE Southwest Missouri's Tuesdays at 2 webinar series. My name is Katie Pattison. I'm the workshop chair for SCORE Southwest Missouri. And I'm going to start with a brief introduction to SCORE. So just a few details for today's workshop. I am your moderator today, along with Charlie Evans from the Christian County Library, who will speak in a moment. And we also have with us Christian Tadani from the U.S. Small Business Administration. If you need anything, we will be on. You can send us a chat to answer your question or help you out with whatever you got. We'd love for you all to introduce yourselves in the chat if you like, just to say who you are, where you're from, what you do if you want to. This webinar will last about an hour. We'll include time for questions at the end and throughout. You're welcome to ask questions throughout, and we'll get those to Heather. You will receive an email within about a week of this event that includes a recording of the event. I don't think we have any handouts for today's event. And contact information for our presenter, should you want to learn more from her. You'll also receive an evaluation email from SCORE. If you would mind, it's a short evaluation. To fill that out, it will help us to plan for future workshops. Okay, so a little bit about SCORE. SCORE is a nationwide nonprofit that is there for you for the life of your business. We have mentoring and resources to support you from idea to exit. There are 3 things to remember that SCORE can help you with. We provide free business advice and mentoring. Wherever you're at in your business, whatever your industry is, SCORE has a mentor that can help you through that. You can request a mentor at score.org. We have lots of mentors locally with lots of great expertise and experience. If you need something more specialized, you have access to SCORE mentors from across the US. Definitely take advantage of that resource if that would be useful to you. SCORE also offers low or no cost business training, just like this workshop you're in today. Here in Southwest Missouri, we typically do up to 3 workshops a month, 2 virtual and 1 in person or hybrid. You can attend that one virtually as well. I'll talk about what some of those are coming up. But you can also watch pre-recorded webinars, on-demand courses. All of that stuff is available on the SCORE website at score.org. And there are some really amazing business resources, templates, articles, blog posts, whatever information you need. It's a great, reliable source to find that information on the SCORE website. These are just a few classes we have coming up here in Southwest Missouri. Next week, we have Business Model Canvas and the Value Proposition for Strategic Planning with John Fleming. This is a great class. I've seen John teach it before. We'll be doing that in person on the 18th, 6:30 to 8 p.m. at the Schweitzer Brentwood Library in Springfield, or you can attend that virtually as well. Our next one after that is Optimizing Your Pricing Strategy to Maximize Profits with Julie Brander, who is a SCORE volunteer based in Memphis. This will be a great class as well. I know that's a topic with a lot of interest. That one's virtual on the 8th of November. You can go to swmissouri.score.org and click on local workshops to register for those or any of our upcoming workshops. Lastly, just a little plug for volunteering with SCORE. SCORE is a volunteer-based organization. Everything we do is possible through the effort of our volunteers nationwide. We have over 10,000 volunteers serving clients in over 1,500 communities with lots of different opportunities to participate. You can assist with workshops, hint, hint, or you could become a mentor. There's lots of ways to share your knowledge and connect in the business community. If you're interested in that, you can reach out to me in the chat, or you can go to score.org/volunteer to fill out a volunteer application and learn more. Once again, here's our local chapter website, swmissouri.score.org, where you can find all that info. And then I want to turn it over briefly to our partner in this workshop, Christian County Library, Charlie Evans.
The Christian County Library is proud to support this SCORE workshop. The Christian County Library has many resources and solutions for small businesses. We can help businesses identify consumer and market trends, provide self-paced technology training, space for meetings, free Wi-Fi, and notary services at every branch. Come visit us at one of our 4 locations in Ozark, Nixa, Clever, and Sparta for your small business needs. Christian?
Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you,
Okay.
Charlie. Before I introduce our host, our guest today, our guest speaker, Heather, I'd like to thank our host, Katie and Charlie, for putting this presentation on and setting it up and all the things you did to organize it and get it ready for the public. It takes a lot of work to put these on, and your efforts are much appreciated. Heather has a 25-year career in technology, crafting all kinds of data into organized, actionable knowledge and stories. I was just talking to her saying I just received some spam email today, and so we were talking about that a little bit before the meeting started. So, this is something that, whether we like it or not, affects all of our lives. So you're very thank you for participating. I admire you for participating and keeping your personal information safe. When I work here at the SBA, I do get calls occasionally. People, something happened to them, by a person who they never even seen in their life. And that's just the way the world works. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Heather. And thank you, Heather, for keeping us abreast of this very important topic.
Thank you for the kind introduction. I am here today to talk about a topic in the industry that we call cyber hygiene. It's the individual actions that we take as regular people and technologists to try to keep safe from all the scams out there. And some of the scams can lead to horrible things. So it's certainly worth taking a look at. I have some technical issues here. Isn't that a lovely way to start a presentation, with a technical issue from the technical person? Let's go ahead and try that again. All right, I want to start with that definition. Cyber hygiene is the practice and focus regarding the everyday secure use of computers, and it is a level of cybersecurity. And then cybersecurity itself is the overarching practice of defending everything that is connected to the internet. So connected computing, servers, mobile devices, electronic systems, all the networks themselves, and defending that data and everything that transpires between people online from malicious attacks. I'll start with usernames and passwords, because so much of everything has to do with authentication, how we reach other people's computers and websites. And this is just eye-opening that on the dark web, our credit card details of regular everyday people are sold pretty cheaply. So this is an older slide I should probably update, but you're taking essentially $10 are what credentials cost, fresh credentials, because people obviously change their passwords if sites have been compromised. So I'll get an updated slide in here for the next time I do this, but $10. But with that in mind, usernames and passwords need to be kept current as breaches happen, but the everyday usernames and passwords also need to not be crackable. So we lead into this. This is one of my favorite slides. This gets updated by Hive Systems. Every year you can take a look at the slide and see how long it takes to crack a password of a certain length. And so if it's only 4 characters, even if it's got numbers, uppercase, lowercase letters, and symbols, it's instant, all the way to 6. So if you see anybody recommending a 6-character password, that's out of date. You'll see here that if you do all of your good due diligence with numbers, uppercase, and lowercase letters and symbols, and you have at least 12, you're at 3,000 years. So for today's computing power, that's decently safe. And I like to recommend 12 characters at least. My personal passwords are typically 20 or more, and I'll get a little more into that in a minute. So you can take a screenshot of this, or I do believe that this presentation will be available. This is a great slide. Another resource out there that we can talk through if we have time, I'll do a live demo on this one, is actually a website called haveibeenpwned.com, and that's how you pronounce it. Pwned means owned in a computer sense. So this is a very old email address of mine. The angelweave@gmail.com has been around for 18, 19 years. However long Gmail's been around, it's been around. And if we enter that into this site, I can do that later, you'll see definitely I've been pwned. And so that's something you can try yourself as well, to put your email addresses in there. It is a valid website. The research has been done on that. The gentleman who keeps this put together and amalgamates the data is a very valid person, and he gets data sets from nice people who actually have this data and make sure that subscribers and regular people can just come and take a look at this. So that's a resource for you. Okay, I want to talk about something called credential stuffing, and I'll background this a little bit. The Uber hack, you may have heard of it. So back in September, Uber had some credentials that were compromised by one set of bad actors. So hackers who go in there, and that's their express goal, is to go and to get credentials. And then their work stops. They go and they sell those on the dark web. And so there's an active set of credentials that was purchased by a hacking group identified as Lapsus, which is a bunch of teenagers actually. So they purchased the credentials. They didn't go harvest them themselves. And then they took their skills in their specialized area, which is getting into systems. And what they did is they took this user's credentials that were valid. So they were able to get to the point of multi-factor authentication. And multi-factor authentication is something beyond that user password combination. Well, they had enough information about the user that basically they kept going on the user. I'm from tech support. I'm from tech support. I know how to log in. I have your credentials, until that person bypassed the multi-factor authentication for them. And I may have a couple of the itty bitty little details off. I'm going to show you later, if we have time, Uber's actual response on their site. But once the hacker was able to get in with the credentials, the username and the password, and then bypass the multi-factor authentication with help from the actual user, then that hacker had the skills to go in and do the two things that hackers like to do on systems to get into. One, they want to cover their tracks so that they can. Two, escalate their privileges so that they own the systems. And that's essentially what happened with Uber. They owned enough of the systems that the hacker could actually get on the company's Slack channel to chat and post a message. So I believe Uber has said no users, meaning as regular humans who use Uber's service, data were compromised, but obviously the company was compromised and then had to repair its reputation and go through all of the notifications of the people. So Uber, credentials. However, the first set of hackers got those credentials, it may have been something like this. And what I have up here now is a little bit of a video, because you never do, and it is air quotes, hacking live. You don't do a hacking demonstration live. This is from a site called Try Hack Me. And if we have time at the end, I can show you the site. It is a fabulous place to learn core fundamentals for free. And for a subscription, you can learn a little bit more about the types of hacks and everything that's happening, so that you're knowledgeable about what's happening in our world, even if you have no desire whatsoever to go into computer attack to make sure it's a white hat hacker, to make sure that systems are safe. That's penetration testing or a white hat hacker. All these terms I can start to throw out at you. The Try Hack Me will teach you exactly what they are, or whether you want to be a systems defender, or whether you just want to be knowledgeable about what people are facing who are working in computer security today. So that's a 3-4 minute introduction here to this video, which is essentially, you see a username and a password and a controlled environment within Try Hack Me on a virtual server where it's safe to fake hack. So without further ado, this is a recording of me that I'll sit back and watch with you. Maybe. I see it. We are looking at a screen within tryhackme.com, which is an area where people can go to learn basic hacking and defense things so that they can be better knowledgeable and protected and can go on to more advanced training in cybersecurity. So I'm going to simulate a very basic attack for you. So you see this page, support login, username and password. I'm going to capture what is being sent to the web server. Instead of having it go there, it's going to go over this thing on the left here. Over here, you'll see that the username was hi and the password is mom, and this is some of the behind the scenes of the web stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and do something with this. I set it to this area called intruder, and what we're going to do from here is turn the username area and the password area into variables, and then stuff in some lists. I've done some work behind the scenes before this so that this is all ready to go. It's just simple configure at this point with this tool, and I've got everything ready to go. I had these two lists, one of the usernames, one of the passwords, and we just have 100 because this is just a test. I'm gonna click start attack, and it's gonna tell us it's gonna go slowly because this is just demo version. We're in a sandbox or a play area. And so it's throttled and will go more slowly than it would out in the wild. Okay, so here it is at the end. And we can see in here, we can move things around. One of the things that's interesting is how can we tell if it worked? Well, this top one here, the 50th one through, is a different length. And what that means is the amount of data going through for a successful login is less than an unsuccessful. And so if we were to try these credentials against this website, let us in. Let's do that. Turn off the capture. Would you look at that? All right. I can't gauge your reaction sitting back here behind my webcam, but I can tell you that there are a couple things going on here that it makes this just a test. One is that these are not actual people's credentials. This is two sets of lists, one of usernames and another passwords, and it mashes them together in what's called a credential stuffing attack. And so this was always going to succeed because that's the point of the room. And most sites won't allow this to happen anyway. You've probably been on websites where you have about 4 times, maybe 5 times to log in, and then it says, this is suspicious. So you can't iterate through 100, 1,000, or 50,000 times on most websites to try to get the username and password combination right. Still, it's eye-opening. It's worth taking a look at and understanding. So that's why I include it. Let me get past that real quick here. So we talked earlier about those 12 characters or more on the combination of the numbers and the letters and the capitalization, varying all that and the symbols, because those passwords, they're hard to crack and they're hard to remember. But because they're hard to remember and we want you to have a unique password per site, because we talked about earlier that have I been pwned, likely at some point, if you've been on the internet for any length of time, you have. Then how do you manage the maybe 200 or more places you visit and the unique passwords? Well, enter the password manager. The example I'm going to give here is LastPass. It's the one I've been using for quite some time, and it's got some great features. I'll jump ahead here to the really important part. If you have a family and you want to cover your entire family, it is a whopping $4 per month to cover the whole family. Some passwords you can share between certain family members, like my husband and I can share our credit card information, but not share that with the kids. But the whole family might have access to Netflix. So the advantages here, other than the low cost and the ability to track these unique passwords, are that it's easy to use. It has multi-factor authentication, of course, against this, and this is going to be your strongest passcode, passphrase will be here, something you can remember, but that's quite long and quite hard to guess. It works on your mobile devices. It works on your computer. It works on all the important things there so that I can pull up LastPass on my phone, in my case, my iPad, and then I do have a PC or a laptop. You can group these things however you would like, into folders however you would like. You can have secure notes. On your entry for a site and its password, you can leave additional information in there. Some of the sites with older ways to authenticate for the multi-factor authentication. So your username, your else is what I mean by multi-factor authentication. Sometimes those have security questions. I actually have a site I visit somewhat regularly. I wish they would update, but all they have for that is security questions. And so I have fake answers for those security questions. And so on my secure note for that site, I've got, here's the question and here's the fake answer I gave it. And it's all locked behind LastPass. It's very simple to master. It can be done in an afternoon or so after you put more and more of these things in here. And you do only have to remember then that master password. The beauty also, I've got one of the beautiful things on here that it helps you track reuse passwords across your site within how it monitors, and it will give you a security score, and you can go and fix and change those where you have reuse passwords once you put the data in. The other nice thing is that it will generate passwords for you. Now, one of my very favorite things to do with LastPass when I'm entering a new site, I'm going to put access in for a new site, is I put it on max. I set all of the settings. I'll put in symbols, capital letters, numbers, and symbols. And then I dialed all the way up to 99 characters and see what it gives me, copy that password and try to paste that into the new site. And sometimes they'll come back and tell you the site will, oh, we only accept 25. Well, okay, then you get 25. But you see the idea, I put a little bit of fun into this. Then some places will actually accept the 99 and hey, I'm super secure. Okay, we talked about this multi-factor authentication. And I talked a little bit about the okay practice of the security questions and the fake answers. The security questions with the real answers are pretty iffy because it's relatively easy to use a process called OSINT. In other words, Google, for people like regular people, it's just Googling and going to figure out, well, what are we looking for here? If I knew my, say, whatever my maiden name is, or my grandmother's maiden name, or my mother's maiden name, these things are discoverable even through Ancestry. And there are specific sites that help you gain that information too. So you never want to give security questions with real answers. The fake answers, they're okay. They're not optimal. Better is to have the site call or email you if you have that option between the two. Choose that. The very best way though is an authentication application like Authy, Google Authenticator, or Duo. If you can have one or more or all of these on your phone because different sites will accept different ones, and then you initiate, I want a code from the multi-factor authentication application. And so it's you doing that, not having something pushed to you that you have to question whether or not it's real. So it's usually that 6-character code, sometimes 7, that you then have to put into the site, but it's you initiating the call to give yourself the code. That makes sense. I see a question. And I'll answer it in context. If a program makes it into our computer and key logs, yeah, we'll get there. I was typing in the master password. Isn't that the worst case that can happen? It is a pretty awful case. And so how can one protect themselves from this weak leak being the one master password to gain keys to all of our accounts or on the password manager? Well, the first piece that you would do is make sure, and I'll come to it a little later as well, that you've got a good valid antivirus running on your system and that you are doing your due diligence to keep that going. And the second thing is on your computers or anything that accesses the internet, you've got to keep it up to date. That includes programs, and that includes definitely your operating system, whether you're on a Macintosh or whether you're on Linux, which as regular people, we don't tend to be on Linux all that often, but those are the Mac OS, because that is the real debate here. If we've got everything in this lovely container and a hacker would get access to that container, wow, there it is all neat and packaged. And the same thing is true if you write all your passwords in a book and somebody gains physical access to your home, the same thing is true there. There is no perfect solution, and I do recognize that, and there's a fabulous question. So if I answered that and you're happy with it, give me a thumbs up. If not, ask me a follow-up and grill me a bit, and I'll see what I can answer on that. All right. So I want to talk a little bit. We were talking in the conversation before everybody joined about how sophisticated the scams are out there. That used to be, we had the Nigerian princes and these emails were clearly fake. And now these emails will come to you and they'll look very real. Even just slightly maybe on the URL, if you were to mouse over the URL, hover over that with your mouse and you could see it. Maybe there's only a character different, that the regular person, even if slightly distracted, wouldn't notice it. And then it takes you, if you do click on it, to a site that looks very, very real. Or you get an email that is very specific to you, that is in a moment in time, something you're actually looking for. Well, what do you do then? You've been hearing me talk for about 20 minutes, so you have a general idea of my personality. If I'm calling in and I'm talking to you and I say, you see it on the left here, this is Heather from tech support from whatever company that provides your IT. And if we talk for 10 to 15 minutes, I suspect with most people, if I have provided enough rapport, I've talked enough about myself, I've been helpful, I can probably talk most people out of their username and password. And so that's what we have to be aware of. So I've got that over here. And when I'm doing this in person, I'll often ask, could I convince some of you? Would you give your username and your password to Heather from tech support? And the answer is maybe. So what on earth do we do with that? The only answer I have for that is to pause at anything unexpected or anything expected but received in a way that wasn't expected. So the example we were talking through earlier is if you're buying a house and it's right around closing time and you get a request, an email with information on how to wire the money. At some point, your mind has to say, an email is not a person. And it's very hard to do that in the moment because it's very expeditious for you and you're doing so many things. You're distracted when you're buying a house. But because an email is not a person, it's a digital representation of something that might be a person. The only thing to do in a situation where someone asks you to take an action is to take that action the way you would typically take the action. In this case, I would call my realtor and say, wow, I just got an email asking for X, Y, and Z to go to A, B, and C. Is this valid? Where should this go? And then work it through in normal channels, never in the convenient click this link, send money, and make it happen. All right. I mentioned earlier the OSINT as we're talking about, which is open source intelligence, Google and programs like it. So it's lurking over there in the corner by the social engineering. All right. Somebody in the questions. Do LastPass and all the password managers allow us to save the 1 to 4 security questions we make at the point of account formation on some sites? Also, wasn't LastPass just hacked to some degree? Is it your choice to stay with them because they immediately invest in even more protection than other competing password managers? So anonymous attendee, I like you. You ask good questions. So LastPass had its source control. Somebody got access to its source control, and many of these password managers and other programs have open source entirely. So there wasn't a breach in terms of something that would be scary to me. None of the data of the users was made available in the breach. And so, yes, I stay with LastPass because of that. And because on my LinkedIn feed and on all of the things I read and investigate, that is the people who are way more intelligent than I am. That is what they are saying and suggesting. So in the research I've done with it, I'm very comfortable that LastPass is, as you said, going to be even more secure and investing in more protection than the competing password managers. I know another one is OnePass. I have not dug into its efficacy, but this is their living. This is what they do. And if they are insecure, their business is gone. That's another thing to consider here too. That is the exact thing that they do. Okay, I hope I answered that one. If I haven't answered that one, please go ahead and bring it back up. All right, so what do we do with all this really scary information? I led into it a little bit. In my opinion, the password manager is the way to start, and that's daunting. Maybe you have a couple hundred sites you visit. Maybe you have stored that information in Google because that's very convenient. But it's like we said with the password manager, if someone gets your Google password, which probably is not as secure as what you would put in a password manager, then you have everything there. And also you might leave information on another computer that you'd be accessing because it's convenient, whereas LastPass or something like that would be on your computer and your devices. All right. Pause before interacting with technology if you are emotional or distracted, if you're in a rush. If the email that you receive, they often try to evoke you into some state of euphoria, like you won the lottery, or a great scare, like the Social Security Administration is coming after you. So if you have been brain hijacked as a human being by someone just really trying to trigger you, then it's not a time to interact with technology. And that's can be hard to do. Okay, I pulled that up. I'll come back to that and take a look, give you a chance to type some more. So I talked about Google a little bit. Take those passwords out of the browser, get them in the password manager, and then make sure they are definitely taken out of the browser. A unique password for each site that you use is important. Antivirus Anti-Malware. I've been using AVG for years. When that subscription expires, I'm probably going to Malwarebytes. So that's something you can Google and research if you are unhappy or use your antivirus as effectively as you would like. The multi-factor authentication is absolutely vital. And you can look more into that. It's often something you have, like your phone, something you know, like a password, or something you are, like say a fingerprint or a retinal scan, or something that you are. I probably didn't say that as well as I could have, so I apologize for that. Keep those computers patched. Operating systems, I know Windows, I did an update on that very recently. And you got to back up your important files. So if you are someone who has a whole lot of files, an offsite backup is probably a good idea for you too, personally and professionally, and within your businesses and organizations. You should be doing backups site, you should be doing backups on site, and then another tertiary way to do a backup, just to make sure you keep. That's very important. All right, part 2 on this. This is where my passion is for what you've learned here and for what you will continue to learn. If you're interested, tell everyone. It's more important than sports scores or even politics, because we are all digital citizens, and it's important that everyone knows some level of safety and that it's important to be safe online. We expect our kids to brush their teeth, and living in 2022 and how the world will be in the future, where absolutely everything is online, it's very important that everyone understands that they are more susceptible than they think. Maybe not to being targeted attacks, such as the example we gave with a person who might be buying a house. That would be a very situational, somewhat targeted attack. But just being out there and being vulnerable by virtue of, say, maybe having the same username and password on 5 sites and credentials are stolen from one. If your credentials are stolen from Walmart, maybe those credentials work on Target as well, for example. If you are working in a company that is big enough to have IT staff, please befriend them. They do amazing work, and that is very hard, even with my level of expertise, to understand what they do. So I actually prefer that I'm in constant awe of the IT people, because I can convey that. The more I learn, the more I recognize there's so much more to learn. So they work really hard at trying to keep your organization as secure as possible. If you see something odd, go ahead and report it. It may be a phishing test within your organization, and that is a really good indicator that the culture of your organization feels safe to report that, whether you fell for it or not. So I saw this, I'm curious, report it to your IT staff. And then if you're within a bigger company, or you are working on growing your company, make sure that from day one, or the day one is now, that you're talking about cybersecurity within your company. It's not just how you touch the computer, it's actually a mindset thing. So cyber hygiene is not especially an interesting thing to talk through, as cyber hygiene, using that word, I'm not fond of it, but the basic practices are so important, and even trying to determine where these practices fit within your processes, also very important. This is the final thing on here that I really want to spend some time on. if your eyes are open right now and you're a little bit afraid or super interested, understand this is a process that you're not going to complete in a day or a week. It's something you're going to have to give some targeted attention to and probably build out a plan and do to get that data over into the password manager. And then to disable that data from being in Google or Microsoft or wherever you're keeping it now, to destroy the spreadsheet where it might live. It will take time to do this. And if you're looking all the way into building business processes that consider security, please be sure to make these processes as simple as possible for the people who have to undertake them, because otherwise what you will find is people will bypass the security you're trying to build in because it's not convenient for them, even if they understand that that's a dangerous thing to do. I see people smoking near the gas pumps all the time, and we all know that's a dangerous thing to do, and yet people still do it. So please understand, it's not people trying to be belligerent, it's just people with the mindset at that moment in time that this is not going to harm me, and that's very human. All right, here's my big ask. As you're talking with people who are looking for a career change or young people, cybersecurity needs people. I've seen a statistic that a very large number of people, it might be 55 or 60% or even more in cybersecurity today, are above the age of 35. And so what's going to happen as people retire from the field? We've got to replace them, and probably even greater numbers, because the world is changing even yet. I started online in 1992. I sent my first email, and the internet was built to disseminate information, not to protect it. So it's been quite a learning curve for everyone as we're trying to keep things as safe as possible, and yet understand that everyone's risk tolerance for what is safe and what isn't is a little bit different. So it's a little bit crazy. I'd rather talk through examples than go through the vigilant part. I mean, that's obvious here. I'm going to show you this and then take a couple questions, and I'll show the things. I gave this presentation about a month ago. I have some things queued up that have happened since then over in my browser. And so I want to give the time for the questions, and then we can talk through some more recent things as kind of a workshop. So this is me from pre-pandemic. I've since gone gray. And then keep a reminder here that anything you receive interaction-wise online may or may not be the human being. So thank you. I think we've got plenty of time. And I'll bring the questions. I'll leave this up here.
Thanks, Heather. I think the additional question there was, do LastPass and all the password managers allow us to save security question answers when you're making it?
Yep, I don't know about all of them. I can speak only to LastPass. When you go in and you provide a credential set for a site, there is a notes area, and so that's where I put those. If I have to make up a security question answer, then I'll put that there. I'll list the question and the fake answer, and then I'll list the next question and the fake answer. It takes a little bit of time, but that's how I do that.
Gotcha. Let's see. Michael mentioned maybe a slide that was skipped.
Yeah, it felt like I skipped a slide. Let's get in here and see. It was a little bit awkward there for a minute. What might I have skipped? Yep. All right, I did. And this is good stuff here. So if you are interested in this, there are certain, I can give a whole other presentation just off this slide. And this is actually a nice lead into some things that are happening here in the community very soon. A VPN is a virtual private network, and it is something you can probably have if you have a bigger company or organization and you have to access things, say in a hybrid work environment. You probably have a VPN. You can purchase your own VPN from home or through your company, and they're pretty inexpensive as well. And what they do is they will secure your data in transit. I believe I get this correct because I sometimes goof one thing because I've just been using VPN so long that I know to do it. So we've got somebody who might be, there we go. On November 2nd, here's where we are, is learn about cyber insurance. November 2nd at the E-Factory J. Wasson Loft here in Springfield during the lunch hour, 11 to 1. The Springfield Tech Council is working with a panel of 4 individuals who work in cyber insurance, and it's going to be a hit. So if you are interested, it is a free event. You just simply need to go and register, and you get free lunch out of it. You come to the E-Factory for a couple hours, you watch the panel, you network with some of your favorite IT people from around town and business people. So the date on that again is November the 2nd. And if you follow the Springfield Tech Council on LinkedIn, that's another way to see notifications about this all the time. And I think I have misspelled, I see it now, stopransomware.gov, but that's a lovely place to start if you want to dig a little bit more into this aspect of cybersecurity, of the cyber hygiene, and what you can do within your businesses. So there's no E there. It's stopransomware.gov. It's from the US government talking about these things. We talked about culture of cybersecurity and trying to put security as early as possible. In the software development side of things, we're trying to make sure that software developers are putting secure practices all the way into their code. And that means to shift left, meaning earlier in the process, from people using it to have security interwoven in with the people coding it. And I'm actually believe it should be even earlier. I've been calling it shift leftist, which is when we're writing the requirements for how the code is going to interact in those technical requirements, and also in the user interface and the user experience, so that everyday people, when they go in there and they start to work with things, they're secure from the get-go and they're not inconvenient to use. So that's what I'm talking about with build a culture of cybersecurity. And you got to know your hardware and you got to know your software. That got infinitely more difficult when everybody got sent home because of a pandemic. And then all of a sudden they're using their own personal computers to connect to the corporate internet. They might be using a VPN, they might not. And all of a sudden, we don't really know what devices can access our data. And so that's a really, if you're a small business or you're a nonprofit, you have an advantage there of knowing what your hardware is and knowing what your software is and cataloging that and building some practices on making sure it's up to date proactively. So small businesses, and I believe nonprofits, can go to this website and register to get a scan. So that's another resource here. Follow the news. That's another thing. There are a lot of places you can get some good cybersecurity news online. I think I have Secure Week as my home when I log into my computer and go to my browser. That's what I get pulled up to see what's going on. And then LinkedIn, there's a lot of information on LinkedIn about the different things happening in the news and the experts' take on it. And then finally here, you're listening to the podcast, because there are so many of them. You can go into your podcast provider of choice and start looking. One of my favorites is Darknet Diaries, because the practitioner of that podcast tells everything in story form and you get a whole lot of detail, and it's just fascinating. So there are a whole lot of those. They make for really good company at the gym. That's somebody asking a question. Can I ask for more info about Codistac and how to work with Heather and how she can help the startups implement the cyber hygiene? Yes, you can. I will go back to that next slide because I've covered all this. This is the easiest way to get a hold of me. And usually in a startup, it would depend on what stage the startup is in. Are we looking at a tech startup where we're actually looking at code and trying to go all the way back to the requirements? It's just where I specialize. Or are we looking at business processes, maybe a more established startup, because certainly there's places to intervene in there as well, in terms of looking at getting security in there. And then also from a culture perspective, who are the people in your company and how aware are they? How much do they care? And how do we reach everybody so that we're integrated in our mission and vision and approach, and including cybersecurity there as well, in a benefit to everybody in their homes, because that's important. This has to benefit not only the organization, but every individual in it. Otherwise, it's not going to take. All right. Oh, WordPress. If we are building a website on WordPress ourselves and about to choose a domain registrar and web hosting company, enter recommendations on the ones that may offer more protections from a hack later in time. I can tell you that as the vice chair of the Springfield Tech Council, the chair and I both use HostGator for what we host. So I've but I recommend that just from my own personal use, not necessarily strictly from protections from a hack later in time. If you are building your website yourself, you may go with more of what they handle and host. If you are hoping to host for other people and you have those skills, HostGator has a package for that as well, where you can put domains underneath your main area and do that. I do recommend on WordPress, don't use the default admin as the username. A lot of the times now we're seeing email addresses as the username, but what happens with WordPress is it just automatically suggests admin, and that's one thing you can control and put a user that no one would ever guess, and that gives you an extra measure of security. So I like that. That's a good question. And WordPress itself, another thing, make sure your plugins are up to date, and also that any plugins that are not in use, that you disable them, and obviously you back up your website, your WordPress, if you're hosting. And there are plugins that'll do that, or you can do it manually through cPanel, or you can do it manually yourself. Hope I answered that one. All right, I'm going to do a time check here and give you a chance for a couple more questions, and then I'm going to flip over to my web browser and show you a couple more things. Oh, this is a long one. When a Trojan virus file bypasses one's antivirus or your Windows Defender firewall and infects one home or business computer, I've learned even the well-reputed antivirus companies require you connect to Wi-Fi. Oh, that's bad. On the infected device to download their antivirus and also run the antivirus product. Well, on the internet to run the fullest scan to spot most, if not all, the infected files. And yes, you're not mistaken at all. This is a bad idea, because if you have a computer that has been infected, the very first thing you do is get it off the network. It needs to be standalone with no access to the internet. And you're going on to stay here because staying connected to the internet is what allows the malicious activity or ransomware attack to happen at any moment. Yes, you can propagate that virus or Trojan or worm or whatever's happening in here. I do not know. So what here is ESET's sysrescue tool offline enough to remove the Trojans if this were to happen to us. So I'm going to have to defer to research on that one and ask my network and take a look at it, because I've never heard of that. I am coming, just to give you a little bit of background on me, I'm coming into this. I've been in the space learning for about a year, because it became a passion to me after a conference session where I sat and listened and thought, egad, things are worse than I thought they are. I have 25 years of experience in software development and the people side of things. And so every little bit I learn, and I learn things from everyone. You can learn something from everyone. So I'm going to look into ESET's sysrescue tool and get back to you on that. So the next thing, are any offline tools remove Trojans after the fact? Let me get you the answer to that as well, because I don't have it today. If you do have some of the answers on that and can provide them to us, then I would be very appreciative, or anything else you'd like me to research, because now I'm intrigued. Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. Fun to interact. So before I leave here, the QR code, if anybody's clicked through, it goes to a blog post that says don't use QR codes. So if you want to get a hold of me, it's basically going to be here, hnoggle@codistac.com, or go to my website and fill out the form there. Or you can read the article, because I promise that QR code goes to that article. All right, good. So I'm going to come out of the presentation here and flip on over to my web browser. Maybe. PowerPoint. Yeah. And then I'm going to move some of the Zoom things around. So what happened yesterday? Does anybody know what happened yesterday? I'll give you a moment in the chat. Any safe voice over IP options? Yeah, that's a good question too. I'll get recommendations on that one. I do not personally use any voice over IP, but I did years ago. So I've got that one written down, although I think everybody's going to bring me that. So what happened yesterday? Has anybody been following the news about the airports and individual airport websites being down, and also some of, I think, the airlines being down? Basically, yesterday we have pro-Russian hackers claiming responsibility for knocking US airport websites offline. And they did this through something called a distributed denial of service attack. And since this is right in the news here, it's often put in with this acronym of DDoS. So big D, and a little O and a big S. And what that essentially is just a bunch of computers iterating madly, saying, hit the site, hit the site, hit the site, hit the site. And the people being hit playing whack-a-mole, trying to block the IPs of the users hitting the sites. So if you are hacked, sometimes your computer is breached and it's turned into a zombie on one of these networks that is then used to hit websites with attacks like this. So it's often called a botnet. It doesn't actually take the website down. So these websites, the airport websites that went offline, there wasn't anybody on their server in their code. They're just getting so many responses that they're being overwhelmed. So just something to know. It's rather interesting. You'll see this if you look up the airport websites, and you look this up from yesterday, you'll see multiple different views on it. NPR was one of the ones I clicked through to. So Russian hacker group, taking credit for it, proud of themselves. LA International, Chicago O'Hare, Hartsfield Jackson, and Atlanta. All right, yeah, airports were targeted. So the call to action from this group, they're hacktivists. They want you to do something is hit all these places. Hey, we're in Missouri, we're not safe. So nobody's data was compromised and no flights, thankfully, were affected by this. But, you know, there's power in this. There's computing power put against this. There's money, there's cost in fighting one of these. So it's something to be aware of, that's in the news, and that happened yesterday. Okay, I keep pulling this up because I thought I saw another one. Let me quit with that. You can go to Uber itself, and they'll have their persuasive defense on here of their attack, and it will have their timeline. So September 16th, it started. And then if you go back up through that, you see the 15th that it started. That's what it said. And then you can walk your way on up through it to see how they handled it, mitigated it, and went through it. So that's one of the things up here. I'm going to try to move there we go. I see another question. There we go. Geek Squad, that's I think what Best Buy has, isn't it? Miro Center with the case wouldn't be able to help her more than she had done already, running the scam with Bitdefender. Ah, yes. I think I know about this and what we were talking through. No guarantee their tools could remove Trojan viruses after the fact, he said. Okay, good. I'm going to go back through here without the answers yet to that. I'll come back to that. And what else is in the news? I saw this yesterday and thought, oh, I'll share this with everybody. So typically, if you're putting together an email scam, there are a bunch of components to it, much like if you're setting up a WordPress website. You've got to actually get the domain registered, which is where the website's going to live and people can call it up through the browser. You've got to get that pushed over. You have to style the website. What's it going to look like? You have to code in all the interactions, any emails that are going to get sent. You got to configure all that. And it does take some time and effort. Well, we now have, and we've had for a while, but this is in the news, phishing as a service. And it's just a couple $100 a month. If you want a nice career in crime, you can read this article and go in here and take a look at this. So there's the interface for this, the phishing as a service. And many of these, if it says that if you get access to these on the dark web, they're going to vet you and make sure you're a good, solid, upstanding criminal. But that this one, they'll let you in regardless. So this is really worth reading if you want to go to the Hacker News and look at phishing as a service. I'll go ahead and scroll down and find the cost of that. It requires users to create an account, buy a subscription for $250 a month for a basic subscription, $450 for 3 months for your professional, higher end hacking phishing service there, right? $850 for a 6-month license. So it's just legitimacy to the criminal enterprise. All right. Couple more things that have happened since this last presentation I gave. And if anybody has kids, maybe your school's software uses Seesaw. And Seesaw got a credential stuffing attack against some of its users who had insecure passwords, just like the one I demoed earlier. And some of those individual accounts were breached, and they used those accounts to send some naughty pictures. And this is a school, so they're extra upset about that. You may not have seen this one in the news, but I have kids. There was a whole lot going around with the school with the Seesaw thing. Plug this in really quick. I have hacker level typing speed, but then I say that and I goof. Plug it in. It's that simple, the have I been pwned that I showed earlier. And then it'll give you the information, the date and time, what was compromised. And I remember most of these because, you know, in 2019, that's not that long ago, Evite would have sent an email saying change your password. But here, you know, somebody out there, dates of birth, email, names, passwords, phone numbers, these are physical addresses, these are private data. And if it's not secured, it's not private anymore. So this is good. Come in here, play with that and take a look at it. And then I do want to end with my favorite here, try hack me, and all the different sources.
Heather, it appears you may have froze.
Yeah, we may have.
In the
lost
interest of
her.
time, yeah, I think I should probably just let you know, tryhackme.com. This is what it looks like. The rooms are like this. You can come in here and take a look at it. And then they have a series of
Heather, you're freezing up, going in and out on us.
We'll give her just a second.
scanning the same, or does some provide a more comprehensive report? I know LastPass will monitor your phone numbers and your email addresses if you plug that in. No LifeLock, but I can look into it. All right.
Okay. Well, thank you, Heather. Any other information, or did we lost you there for just a second? You were kind of coming in and out, but I think you're back now, aren't you?
I think it was the teenagers coming home and getting on the internet.
Oh, yeah, that's how that goes, right?
When all else fails, blame it on the teenagers.
It's the right time though. This is right when they get home. So I was
Yeah.
actually concerned about that.
Directly on the internet, I get it. All right. Well, Heather, we sure appreciate you being here today and speaking for our SCORE audience. Folks, we
Thank you.
will, like I said, send out an email to everyone registered for this that will include the recording of this session. And we hope we'll see you all next time. Thank you.